The old antique shop smelled of dust and forgotten history. Dim lights flickered as Jake Carter stepped inside, shaking off the cold evening air. He wasn't sure why he had come in. He had just been wandering the streets after work, lost in thought. The shop looked like the kind of place that sold strange trinkets, things that had once belonged to people with long-forgotten stories. Jake ran his fingers over old books, rusted pocket watches, and odd-looking statues. Nothing caught his interest until he saw the necklace. It sat inside a glass case, glowing faintly under the yellow lights. A black chain held a dark blue stone, swirling with silver patterns that seemed to move when he looked closely. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. "Beautiful, isn't it?" came a raspy voice from behind. Jake turned to see the shopkeeper, a frail old man with deep wrinkles and sharp, watchful eyes. He had the look of someone who had seen things he wished he could forget. "Yeah," Jake said, still staring at the necklace. "How much?" The old man's expression darkened. "That one's not for sale." Jake frowned. "Why not?" The man sighed, rubbing his temple as if deciding whether to say more. "Some things belong in the past. That necklace, it carries a curse. It's not meant to be worn." Jake chuckled, thinking it was just a sales trick. "Come on, it's just jewelry." "How much?" The shopkeeper hesitated. His bony fingers tapped the wooden counter. Then, after a long silence, he finally said, $50. Jake pulled out his wallet and placed the money on the counter. The old man exhaled, almost like he had given up. He unlocked the glass case, took out the necklace, and placed it in a small black pouch. As Jake reached for it, the man grabbed his wrist. "Listen to me, son," he said in a low, serious voice. "If you hear *** whispers in the dark, if the lights flicker for no reason, take it off. And whatever happens, never let them find you." Jake stared at him. "Who's them?" The old man released his grip and shook his head. "Pray you never have to find out." Jake hesitated, but then shrugged it off. The old guy was just trying to make the sale more dramatic. He stuffed the pouch in his pocket, nodded at the shopkeeper, and walked out into the night. Strange signs begin. By the time Jake got home, the city was quiet. His apartment was small but comfortable, just a couch, a desk with his laptop, and a tiny kitchen. He tossed his keys on the table and pulled out the necklace. It felt warm against his palm, almost like a living thing. Shrugging, he slipped it over his head. The stone rested against his chest, a perfect fit. The moment he wore it, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The room suddenly felt different. The air thickened. The lights flickered once. Jake frowned. "Weird," he muttered. He shook off the uneasy feeling, made himself a quick dinner, and settled onto the couch. Within minutes, he was asleep. The nightmares begin. It started with a whisper, a voice, distant but urgent, calling his name. Jake. His body felt heavy. He was dreaming. He knew that. But it didn't feel like a normal dream. It felt real. He was standing in a dark void, stars scattered above him like shattered glass. Shadows moved in the distance, tall figures with glowing eyes. They were watching, waiting. Then came the voice again, louder this time. "We aavfou." Jake woke up gasping. His heart pounded. Sweat covered his skin. The room was completely dark. The power was out. Then, a knock. His breath caught in his throat. Someone was outside his door. Slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Jake swallowed hard. It was past midnight. No one should be here. He grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight, creeping toward the door. His heart hammered in his chest. Something felt terribly wrong. He placed his hand on the doorknob. And then his phone screen glitched. The numbers warped. The battery drained instantly, and the screen went black. A deep, inhuman voice echoed in his mind. "You are wearing what belongs to us." Jake stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own feet. His breathing was fast and uneven. He yanked at the necklace, trying to pull it off, but it wouldn't budge. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then, boom, the door shook violently. Jake backed away, panic flooding his veins. His instincts screamed at him to run. But before he could even move, the entire room trembled. The lights flickered back on, but they weren't normal. They glowed an eerie blue. Jake turned toward the window and froze. A massive shadow loomed outside, towering, watching, waiting. And then, through the glass, two glowing eyes stared directly at him. "We have come for you." Jake stood frozen, his breath shallow. The glowing eyes outside the window didn't blink, didn't move, just watched. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, hide, escape, but his legs wouldn't move. Then, without warning, the entire window cracked. A jagged web of fractures spread across the glass, but it didn't shatter. Instead, a low, humming sound filled the air. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the necklace. Jake yanked at the chain, desperate to take it off, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like it had fused to his skin. The blue stone on his chest pulsed, and suddenly, an overwhelming wave of dizziness hit him. His vision blurred. His body went cold. Then, he wasn't in his apartment anymore. The room around him twisted, melted, shifted. He felt weightless, like he was falling through an endless void. His ears rang with an eerie whisper, a voice that wasn't human. "You were never meant to find it. Now, they know." Jake gasped for air as he slammed back into reality. He was still in his apartment, but everything was wrong. The air smelled different, metallic. The walls seemed stretched, warped. The lights flickered again, but this time, they weren't blue. They were red. And then, the knocking returned. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, it wasn't just from the door. It was from the windows, the walls, the ceiling. A deep, guttural voice rumbled through the room, making the very air vibrate. "Open the door, human." Jake stumbled backward, his mind racing. He grabbed the nearest object, a heavy lamp, and held it like a weapon. His hand trembled. He had no idea what was waiting outside, but one thing was clear. He wasn't safe here. The doorknob twisted. Jake's breath hitched. He hadn't unlocked it. Run. The whisper wasn't coming from the outside. It was inside his own head. Jake bolted. He dashed toward the back exit of his apartment, throwing himself down the stairs. As he reached the alleyway behind the building, a cold wind hit him like a slap. The streetlights above flickered wildly. He glanced up, and his blood went ice cold. 3 towering figures stood at the end of the alley. They were at least 10 feet tall, their skin a dark metallic gray. Their eyes glowed the same eerie blue as the necklace, and strange symbols pulsed across their arms. Their movements were too smooth, too inhuman. One of them raised a hand, and in an instant, gravity shifted. Jake was yanked off his feet. He screamed as his body flew toward them, but just as he reached their outstretched hands, a blinding explosion of light erupted behind him. Jake crashed to the ground. His ears rang. The alley was filled with smoke, the metallic stench of burned air filling his lungs. He coughed violently, scrambling backward. And then, someone grabbed his arm. A woman, tall, muscular, eyes glowing a golden hue. She wore a sleek, dark suit, covered in markings that looked just like the symbols on the aliens. But unlike them, she wasn't attacking him. "Get up," she commanded. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "We have to go. Now." Jake stared at her, stunned. Who are you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed to the 3 figures, who were now emerging from the smoke. Their bodies reformed, healed. Whatever blast had hit them, it hadn't been enough. "You took something that was never meant for you," the woman said, tightening her grip on his arm. "And now, they won't stop until you're dead." Jake swallowed hard. His entire world had just turned upside down. And this was only the beginning. Jake's legs burned as he ran through the dimly lit streets, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The woman, whoever she was, dragged him forward with inhuman strength, her grip like iron around his wrist. Behind them, the towering alien figures stalked forward, unfazed by the blast that had nearly obliterated the alley. They moved with a terrifying grace, their metallic gray skin reflecting the flickering streetlights. Their glowing blue eyes locked onto Jake, unblinking, unrelenting. "They won't stop," the woman hissed, yanking him into a narrow side street. "Not until you're either captured or dead." Jake stumbled, nearly losing his footing. Who are you?" "Not now," she snapped. "Just run." A deep guttural howl echoed behind them, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Jake risked a glance over his shoulder, and immediately wished he hadn't. One of the alien giants had raised its massive arm, and a swirling vortex of energy formed in its palm. The moment it unleashed the blast, the entire alleyway behind them exploded. Brick, metal, and glass rained down like a storm. Jake threw his arms over his head, barely managing to stay on his feet as the shockwave sent him stumbling forward. His ears rang, his vision blurred. And yet, the woman never stopped moving. She dragged him down a set of metal stairs, kicking open the rusted door of an abandoned subway station. The moment they stepped inside, she slammed the door shut and pressed her hand against it. A strange golden glow spread from her fingertips, sealing the metal shut. It shimmered, pulsed, then solidified. Jake doubled over, gasping for breath. His entire body ached. His mind was spinning. "What the hell is happening?" He finally choked out. "Who are you? What do they want from me?" The woman stared at him, her golden eyes burning with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. "You have something that belongs to them," she said, nodding toward his chest. Jake looked down at the necklace, the same one he had bought just hours ago. But now it didn't look the same. The once dull blue gemstone was now pulsing, alive, almost as if it had a heartbeat of its own. "You don't understand," the woman continued. "That's not just a necklace. It's a mark, a symbol of lineage. And by putting it on, you didn't just claim ownership of it. You claimed the right to lead." Jake's stomach twisted. "Lead? Lead what?" She exhaled sharply. "The Zurakai." "The what?" "The alien race that's hunting you right now." Jake took a shaky step back, his mind struggling to keep up. That's insane. I bought this from some random antique store. How the hell am I suddenly the leader of an alien race?" "You weren't supposed to find it," she said, crossing her arms. "It was hidden, lost for centuries. But now that it's in your hands, the Zurakai believe you are their rightful ruler." Jake let out a nervous laugh. "Great. Then why are they trying to kill me?" The woman's face darkened. "Because not all of them want a human king." Silence stretched between them, thick with tension. The subway tunnel around them groaned, the distant sound of dripping water echoing through the hollow space. Finally, Jake spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happens if they catch me?" The woman's expression didn't change. "Then you die, and whoever kills you takes the throne." Jake swallowed hard. His simple purchase had just turned into a death sentence. And this was only the beginning. Jake's pulse thundered in his ears. He leaned against the cold subway wall, his breath coming in short gasps. His legs felt like lead, his lungs burned, and his mind refused to process the insanity unraveling before him. A king. A leader of an alien race. It was too much. Just hours ago, he was living his regular life. Work, take-out dinners, mindless scrolling on his phone. Now he was being hunted by alien giants for a necklace he bought off some street vendor. He looked down at the glowing stone resting against his chest. It pulsed, almost like it was alive. The woman, his mysterious rescuer, stood a few feet away, listening intently. Her golden eyes flickered under the dim subway lights, her posture stiff, ready for an attack. "We can't stay here," she finally said, her voice low but firm. "The ceiling won't hold them for long. They'll track the necklace, track you, wherever you go." Jake forced himself to straighten. His body ached, his muscles screamed, but there was no time to fall apart. "I need answers," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who are you? Why are you helping me?" The woman's gaze locked onto his, unflinching. "My name is Aaron. I was sent to retrieve the necklace before it fell into the wrong hands." Jake let out a bitter laugh, rubbing his temples. "Well, too late for that." Aaron didn't react. "The Zurakai, those who are hunting you, have been waiting for this moment for centuries. Their empire has been leaderless, trapped in chaos. The one who holds that symbol," she pointed at the necklace, "claims the right to rule." Jake shook his head. "That makes no sense. Why would aliens care about me? I'm just a guy who—" "You activated it." Jake froze. "The necklace was dormant," Aaron continued. "But when you put it on, it woke up. And now, the Zurakai know their king has returned." Jake stared at her. "I am not their king. Tell that to them." Aaron's tone was sharp. "Some will want you to rule. Others will want you dead. Right now, you have no control, no training, no allies. That makes you vulnerable." Jake exhaled, running a hand through his hair. His entire body felt off, wrong, different. Like something inside him had shifted. He looked down at his hands. At first, they seemed normal. But then, for a brief second, they flickered. The veins beneath his skin shimmered with a faint golden light. Jake's breath hitched. "What the hell is happening to me?" Aaron's expression hardened. "The transformation has begun." Jake took a step back, panic rising in his chest. "What transformation?" "The moment you activated the necklace, your body started adapting," Aaron explained. "The true rulers of the Zurakai are not like their warriors. They are more evolved, stronger, faster, capable of things beyond human understanding." Jake's head spun. "You're telling me I'm becoming one of them?" Aaron hesitated. "Not entirely. But the longer you wear that necklace, the less human you will be." Jake swallowed hard, his mind racing. Could he take it off? Would that stop it? As if reading his thoughts, Aaron shook her head. "It won't let go of you now. You are bound to it, and it is bound to you." A deep, rumbling vibration echoed through the subway tunnel. Aaron's eyes snapped toward the ceiling. "They found us." Jake's blood ran cold. "I thought you sealed the door." "They're stronger than you think," Aaron said, grabbing his wrist. "And they aren't coming to negotiate." The walls shook. The overhead lights flickered. Then, boom! A section of the tunnel collapsed behind them, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. Jake barely had time to react before a massive shadow loomed through the smoke. One of the Zurakai stepped forward, its glowing blue eyes locked onto him. It raised its arm. Energy crackled at its fingertips. Jake's body moved on its own. Before he could even think, he dodged. Fast. Faster than any human should have been able to move. The Zurakai's energy blast missed by inches. Jake's chest heaved, his mind racing. What was that? Aaron didn't wait for him to figure it out. She grabbed him by the collar and shoved him forward. "Run," she commanded, "unless you want to find out how much pain your body can take." Jake didn't argue. They sprinted through the tunnels as more Zurakai warriors poured in behind them, their howls shaking the ground. Jake knew one thing for sure now. This wasn't just a hunt anymore. It was war. Jake's heart pounded as he sprinted through the dark subway tunnels, his breath ragged, his mind a chaotic mess. The Zurakai warriors were right behind him, their heavy footsteps echoing like distant thunder. Their glowing blue eyes cut through the darkness. hunting him, tracking every movement. Erin ran beside him, her grip tight around his wrist. "Keep moving," she commanded. Jake had no choice. He was running for his life. But something was different. His body felt lighter. His legs carried him faster than before, his strides almost effortless. He didn't feel the usual burn in his muscles or the sharp sting of exhaustion. It was as if his body was adapting, becoming something more. But there was no time to think about it. A sudden blast of energy shot past his ear, scorching the wall beside him. He ducked instinctively, rolling forward just in time to avoid another. The tunnel behind them exploded, sending a shockwave through the air. Jake turned back and saw them. 4 towering Zurich-High warriors, their armored bodies glowing with a strange energy. Their weapons hummed in the dim light, pulsing with lethal power. One of them, a warrior larger than the rest, stepped forward. His voice rumbled through the tunnel. "You cannot run from destiny, King." Jake felt a chill crawl up his spine. Before he could react, the warrior lunged. Jake's body moved on its own. He sidestepped the attack faster than his mind could process, his reflexes sharper than ever before. He barely had time to register his own movement before his hand shot out, colliding with the warrior's chest. And then, boom! A shockwave erupted from his palm, blasting the warrior backward into the tunnel wall. The impact cracked the concrete like fragile glass. Silence. Jake's breath hitched. What was that? Erin grabbed his shoulder, pulling him away before he could dwell on it. "We don't have time for this. Keep running." Jake didn't argue. They tore through the tunnels, dodging falling debris and energy blasts. Every second felt like an eternity. The air was thick with dust, making it harder to see. The Zurich-High were relentless, their roars vibrating through the metal walls. Then, a light ahead. Erin pointed. There, the emergency exit. Jake pushed forward, heart hammering. But just as they reached the exit, a massive figure dropped down from above, blocking their path. It was him, the Zurich-High general. His armor was darker than the rest, lined with glowing red veins of energy. His piercing eyes locked onto Jake like a predator sizing up its prey. Unlike the other warriors, he didn't rush in with brute force. He simply raised a hand. And suddenly, Jake couldn't move. His body seized up, his muscles locking into place. It was as if an invisible force had wrapped around him, trapping him like a puppet on strings. The general's voice was low, cold, final. "Enough games." Jake's mind screamed, but his body refused to listen. His arms, his legs, frozen. He struggled, but the force holding him was unbreakable. The general stepped forward, his gaze scanning Jake's face, then dropping to the glowing necklace on his chest. "You don't even understand what you are, do you?" the general muttered. "Pathetic." Erin lunged at him, daggers drawn, but with a flick of his wrist, the general sent her flying into the wall. She hit the concrete hard, a sharp gasp escaping her lips. Jake's rage ignited. Something deep inside him snapped. And suddenly, the force holding him shattered. The general's eyes widened in shock as Jake's entire body began to glow. Not just the necklace. All of him. A burst of energy erupted from his core, sending a shockwave through the tunnel. The general stumbled back, momentarily thrown off balance. The power rushing through Jake's veins felt unreal. Like he had been asleep his whole life, and was finally waking up. His body moved before he could think. 1 second, he was standing still. The next, he was behind the general. Fast, too fast. Before the general could react, Jake struck. His fist connected with the general's armor, and the impact sent a crack running through the metal. The general let out a snarl, turning on him with fury. But Jake didn't stop. He could feel it now, his true strength. It was like an ancient force buried deep inside him was finally unlocking. The general swung his blade. Jake dodged. A lightning-fast strike. Jake countered. For the first time since the chase began, Jake wasn't running. He was fighting back. But then, something changed. The general smirked. "Good," he said. "You're finally waking up. That means you're ready for what comes next." Jake barely had time to react before the general vanished. 1 second he was there. The next, he was gone. And then, pain. A searing, burning pain erupted in Jake's chest. His vision blurred. He looked down. The general's blade was buried in his side. The world spun. His body gave out. And then, darkness, pain. It was the first thing Jake felt. A deep, searing agony radiating from his side, pulsing with each heartbeat. His body felt heavy, his limbs sluggish, his mind drifting between darkness and light. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear muffled voices, but they felt far away. He tried to move. Nothing. Tried to speak. His throat burned. Then, a sudden jolt of energy. His eyes snapped open, and he gasped, sucking in a sharp breath, like he had been drowning and just broke the surface. Bright lights blinded him for a moment, but as his vision adjusted, he found himself lying on a metallic surface inside what looked like a healing chamber. Strange glowing symbols hovered in the air, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. And then, he remembered. The chase. The Zurakai general. The fight. And then, the blade. His hand shot to his side, expecting to feel the wound, the warm, sticky blood. But there was nothing. Just smooth, unbroken skin. What? A voice interrupted his thoughts. "You are lucky to be alive." Jake turned sharply. Erin stood beside the chamber, arms crossed, her face unreadable. But there was something in her eyes, something different. Relief. Concern. Or was it something else? Jake sat up slowly, his body still feeling off. "Where are we?" Erin exhaled, glancing toward a large window that revealed the endless blackness of space. A safe place. For now. Jake followed her gaze. Outside, stars stretched infinitely, but they weren't alone. A massive battlecruiser loomed in the distance, surrounded by sleek, angular fighter ships. The insignia on their hulls was unmistakable. Zurakai. Jake's pulse quickened. "They're still hunting me." Erin nodded. "And they won't stop until they get what they want." Jake clenched his fists. "The necklace." She shook her head. "Not just the necklace." She stepped closer, her expression serious. "Jake, they're hunting you." Silence hung between them. Jake swallowed hard. "Why? What do they want from me?" Erin hesitated. Then, finally, she spoke. "They don't just want you dead. They want you to remember." Jake's brows furrowed. "Remember what?" Erin placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip firm. "Who you really are." His chest tightened. A sinking feeling twisted in his gut. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. "I'm just a guy who bought a stupid necklace at some antique store. I'm not." "You're not just anything," Erin interrupted. "That stupid necklace wasn't just an old artifact. It's a royal sigil, a marker of the lost bloodline." Jake's breath caught. "Lost bloodline." Erin nodded. "A long time ago, the Zurakai had a ruler, one unlike any before. He was powerful, stronger than any warrior. He had the ability to channel energy in ways that no one understood. But he vanished, disappeared without a trace." Jake frowned. "What does that have to do with me?" Erin took a deep breath. "Jake, that ruler was your ancestor." His mind reeled. "No, that's not possible. You survived a blade that should have killed you instantly. You moved faster than even the strongest Zurakai warrior. You released an energy shockwave that shouldn't be possible for a human." Erin leaned in. "You are Zurakai, Jake." His blood ran cold. "No, you've just been asleep. But the necklace, it's waking you up." Jake's hands trembled. He looked down at his chest, where the glowing pendant rested, the same pendant that had started this entire nightmare. But now it felt different. It felt like it belonged. His heart pounded. If that's true, then what do they want from me? Aaron's jaw tightened. They want to control you, or kill you. Jake's throat went dry. And what do you want? Aaron held his gaze. I want you to fight back. Silence. Jake inhaled slowly. His mind was a storm of emotions: fear, disbelief, confusion. But underneath it all, there was something else. Something awakening. A power he had never felt before. A truth he could no longer deny. Finally, he looked up at Aaron, his eyes steady. What do we do next? Aaron smirked. We make sure they never see what's coming. Jake stood at the edge of the viewing deck, staring out into the endless void of space. The weight of everything Aaron had told him pressed against his chest like an invisible force. Zurich-Kai. A lost bloodline. A war that had been raging for generations, and he was the key to it all. He clenched his fists, the faint glow of the necklace reflecting off the glass in front of him. It no longer felt like just an artifact. It pulsed, almost in sync with his heartbeat, as if something inside it was calling out to him. Behind him, Aaron's voice cut through the silence. They know you're awake now. Jake turned to face her. She stood with her arms crossed, her usual sharp confidence laced with urgency. Then we don't have much time, he said. Aaron nodded. The Zurich-Kai fleet is mobilizing. If they capture you before your full powers awaken, they'll either bend you to their will or they'll kill you. Jake took a deep breath. He had spent most of his life believing he was just an ordinary guy, just a human. Now, the truth threatened to tear apart everything he thought he knew. But there was one thing he did know. He wasn't going to run. What's the plan? He asked. Aaron pulled up a holographic map. A star system flickered to life in front of them, its planets rotating slowly. One of them, dark, ringed with asteroids, was marked in red. The hidden Zurich-Kai stronghold, she said. It's where they control most of their fleet's movements. If we can infiltrate it, we might find out exactly what they're planning. Jake studied the map. And let me guess, it's heavily guarded. Aaron smirked. Oh, extremely. Jake sighed. Of course it is. Another voice joined them. That's why we're not going in alone. Jake turned to see Captain Rix stepping into the room. The seasoned warrior had been skeptical of him at first, but after witnessing Jake's abilities firsthand, Rix had changed his stance. Now there was something almost respectful in his gaze. My team is ready, Rix said. But I'll be honest, this mission, it's a suicide run. Jake met his gaze. Only if we fail. Rix let out a small chuckle. I like the way you think, kid. Aaron zoomed in on the stronghold. We'll need to hit them fast. Their defense grid is strongest at the outer ring, but if we can get past that, we can slip into their command center undetected. Jake nodded. And once we're inside. Aaron hesitated. Then, we find the one thing they fear most. Jake frowned. What is it? Aaron looked at him. You. Silence filled the room. Jake exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the table. The truth was, he still didn't fully understand the power inside him. It had only surfaced in moments of desperation, when his life was on the line. But if the Zurich-Kai feared him that much, then it meant he was capable of more than he even realized. And he was going to find out exactly what that meant. Aaron placed a hand on his shoulder. Whatever happens, you need to trust yourself. Jake looked at her. And if I don't? Aaron smirked. Then trust me. Jake let out a small laugh. It was the first time he had laughed in days. He turned back to the map, his determination hardening. The Zurich-Kai had spent their entire existence trying to erase his bloodline. But now, they were about to find out that he wasn't so easy to erase.